I would like to provide a Christian perspective of AI art with respect to you guys actually using the technology, but with also the perspective of creation. AI art is taking away the dopaminergic satisfaction of creating art. It's stopping us from creating new neural pathways and enjoying the hands-on experience with art. Your brain forms different neural pathways when you're creating art, and that is lost when you're only typing prompts. All of a sudden, you're creating new neural pathways in your brain that have never been done before, and as far as I can tell, it is not a natural form of creation. Of course, you can look at AI art and compare it to other art and get a dopaminergic response, but what you're lacking is the intimacy that goes into handcrafting something, such as when God creates something with his own hands. God is very intimate in everything he creates. When God creates something, I do not believe he is just creating just like this. In his mind, I believe it is a slow process of a portrait-like painting. Although, from a perspective of us, it's going to be a quick thing. He discusses how he forms us like clay, and that there's a process to forming us. He's intimate with his creation, and very intimate with us. When we enter AI art, we type in these prompts to get art to be created in the snap of a finger. And sure, God's creation happens quickly, but when he's actually doing it, I strongly believe that he's doing it with a slow, intimate process, just as we do when we are painting or drawing or creating something by hand, engineering, writing music, etc. And the moment we use technology to take over, we are losing that intimacy. You can type and think something, and yes, it may come from your heart, and there may be a possibility of it being okay, but there's an intimacy loss that you can only experience from hands-on creation of art. God states, "I knitted you in your mother's womb." This is clearly signifying that there is an intimate form of creation when he created you. When he created us, he knitted us by hand, is what he's implying here. And it wasn't just a command prompt creating us. He was there for every single process that was involved in creating you. And he also states, every hair on your head is numbered. When we go into AI, we lose the moment of the significance of a brush stroke, or the heartfelt focus that goes into creating that art. Long story short, I'm saying intimacy. A command prompt is not intimate, but I can also see the perspective of you being able to express yourself in ways that you weren't able to before, maybe by physical limitation or mental, neurological limitations, whatever it may be that prevented you from creating the art that you wanted to create. But then there's also the issue of creating something that does not contain life within it. When I look at AI art, it's as if something is missing. It's like it's lacking life in some way. It could be because the technology is limited at the moment and that it just doesn't get the image right yet, but it might later on. But as of right now, something about it just feels empty inside. It's as if it doesn't satisfy my soul or my mind or something. Something seems off, and I just can't explain it other than saying it looks dead. But like I said, perhaps it's because the technology is new and is limited as of right now. But when you think about it, it does make sense because it is AI creating the art, and there's no actual intimate heart involved in the process of creating it other than a command prompt. But I also see the other alternative of it being used as a tool that gives you an enhanced ability to create. And will never be as intimate as God, but he did give us these abilities to create things by hand, and I'm just very concerned at where this technology is going to go, because we are warned about the end times. There's a Bible verse in particular that I want to mention. It says, "The coming of the lawless one will be one in accordance with how Satan works. He will use all sorts of displays of power through signs and wonders that serve the lie." I don't know what power God has given fallen angels from a spiritual to physical connection, because we do see that in the Bible, he does allow them to interact with us in the physical world, but there's also a spiritual component that we can't perceive. But regardless, technologically speaking, if the enemy is able to use this, he would easily be able to create false signs and wonders, especially once technology reaches the point to where it can observe our environment and exponentially grow into the ability to create advanced technologies beyond comprehension, if God allows it.
Satanic signs can be done by a supernormal power, Satan, right, that can deceive people. But they're done to take people away from the truth, not to direct people to the truth. And the one thing that we know Satan can't do is he doesn't have the power over life. Mm-hmm. There's something in Revelation where he says he reanimates the beast, mm-hmm. but he doesn't resurrect the beast, okay? So if Satan had the power over life and death, then we wouldn't know if the resurrection came from God or Satan. It could be a deceptive resurrection rather than the true resurrection. And some of the ways we know this, for example, when Moses and Aaron were dealing with the Egyptian magicians in the Exodus story, they would mimic some of the things Moses did, but when it got to life, even the magician said, "This is the hand of God. We can't do this." Mm-hmm.
Dude, this is wrong, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing! It's rotating.
So this is the newly unveiled Tesla robot. It's called TeslaBot. It's a 5'8", 125-pound, sleek-looking, like black and white, human-shaped robot with this face mask with a screen on it. It's got hands with, full 10 fingers. It's got feet, but with no toes. It's pretty slow. It has a max speed of 5 miles per hour so that you can outrun it. And then it can lift things up to 10 pounds with the arms extended, or it can deadlift 150. Lots of cameras and actuators, and of course the full self-driving computer inside. So they're saying it's gonna be easy to overpower or run away from, so that should never be a concern. But the main purpose, the purpose of this Tesla bot, the thing that they kept saying over and over again on stage during the presentation and during Q&As when they're asked about it, they kept defaulting to, it will be able to do tasks that are repetitive, dangerous, or boring, so that humans don't have to. And so if you buy Tesla as a robotics company, then yeah, this makes sense. It's just another robot that will use the sensors to scan its environment and make a bunch of decisions and navigate around this world that it's in.
I won't get into that. I'm just going to keep it right here for now and just go a little bit further for a moment for you to understand God's intimate creation. When I think of God creating, I think of Him quickly creating, but within that speed, in His perspective, with His intelligent mind, it's a slow, hands-on process. Just like the intricacy of using a paintbrush. Lovingly holding something in His hand, bringing it into existence with His power. Or even looking down at the surface that He has created and drawing life up into it. And just vastly doing this at a slow pace, yet fast at the same time. Speaking things into existence and then just swiping His hands and life just coming forth from it. Just the beauty of the idea of what it could be. And the great part about it is that my perspective is too small and almost blasphemous to even talk about how He created us. We may see God creating very quickly in the twinkling of an eye, but in His perspective with His vast mind, there is intimacy beyond comprehension. He is eternally loving. He is eternally focused. Everything He does has meaning. Everything has a level of intimacy beyond comprehension. And you just do not get that with technology. And the only way we can get close to understanding his intimacy is through creating with our hands, whether it be through music or painting, engineering, etc. There's a level of focus and time that goes into the process. And that doesn't mean that AI cannot be used to accelerate the process of creating, because I'm actually looking into considering it for myself. Because of my health limitations, it's actually becoming an aid for me to create again. Since I lost my health, I lost my ability to write like I used to, and now ChatGPT is giving me an opportunity to produce the writing based from my heart and produce it outwards that will express me, but I have to use it very carefully and intricately as a tool. Whereas people are already using ChatGPT sinfully to produce content without putting in any effort or checking it for any validity. I'm already witnessing some horrible things being created with this technology, and it's really sad, to be honest with you. A man created a false child, a fantasy child, by taking the audio of a little girl and then using an AI image generator to create an image of a false child, and then combining them and animating it to then have that child act as if it's his daughter, creating a false relationship when God created us to have a physical relationship. Meanwhile, these people are using technology in this disgusting fantasy, shared fantasy world. It's just not right. That's not what the technology should be used for. I will say this is really interesting, and I'm going to look into this further as time goes on, and I hope this doesn't get censored or that they utilize it more. This is what the technology is supposed to be used for. NIH, it is a undiagnosed disease network, is already utilizing a form of AI.
So with this happening, the idea is that millions and millions of people with possibly rare diseases and even healthy people are going to be in their genome sequence, and there probably aren't enough of us altogether to be manually looking through all of that data. So it becomes not just convenient, but necessary to automate this. So a few of the ways in which we've done this in collaboration with folks in computer science here at Stanford, especially the lab of Dr. Gil Bejarano, are develop tools that do this. So Amelie is a package of software developed by Dr. Bejarano, work led by a graduate student, Johannes Bergmeyer, that does this. It goes out, looks at the medical literature, tries to decide which articles are about genetics and which are about genetic diseases. It's able to access those and pull out of them all of the information about relations between symptoms and diseases. So exactly what we're trying to know about in diagnosing these patients. So right now we work with books and articles ourselves and databases where people have manually extracted all this information, but there's so much of it, there's the hope that tools like this can help us do it automatically and be even more efficient. So this is a sample of patients' data, but you input the set of genes you might be interested for a patient, their phenotypes as codes, so the same two things, the pile of papers and the piece of DNA, and then the computer will look into its compendium of all of the articles that it's extracted and try to point out to the clinician which articles and therefore which genes are most relevant to the case. And it's able to do it reasonably well. It's certainly well over half the patients, in some cases up to 60, 70, or 80%. It does really well. It gets the right gene in the top. Obviously, it, as we do, struggles with the hardest of cases, but we're trying to push this forward. So that's the medical literature part of it. Also trying to automate the extraction of the information from the patient's records. So patients come in with thousands and thousands of pages of records. It can take a long time to go through that. You might want a very efficient way to pull all the information out. The other idea is if you're going to go back and look at the patient's genotype again, you might want to go back and look at their records again. But you don't. If I follow several hundred or thousand patients, I can't be spending time every week looking at all of their records. But a computer can do that. So it can be monitoring a patient's record, looking for an important change that might be the clue that is the breakthrough to what their diagnosis is. So this is a tool called ClinFen. This was, again, Johannes Bergmeyer and now Stanford student Cole Diceroth. And they developed a system to automatically pull the information out of the patient records. And the way they do this is they take the records as text. They break the sentences down into groups of words that seem like they should be together, and then they process those and try and see which standard terms they may match the most. And they do really important things, like they don't pay attention to things that the note says the patient does not have. They try to ignore things that like the patient's uncle has. So they just want to know what the patient has. And depending on your view on technology, it's either surprising or expected that it does this very well. So it pulls things out very quickly. And some of the really brilliant work that they did is that their system functions at takes about the same amount of time to look at records, from like 100 pages to 1,000 pages, whereas other systems slow down a lot. So it's very efficient. It can take on data from a large number of patients at once. And when you try and do things like rank the patients by how likely a diagnosis is based on the input just from the ClinFen tool, it does nearly or sometimes better than how a list of terms from a person would do. So there's a lot of promise that this can help us automate a lot of this work. And so we've talked about looking at the patient's data initially, reanalyzing it. Earlier I showed you the 200 plus diagnoses new conditions being defined each year. And what we estimated is that because of that, you just wait a couple years and 10 to 15% of your undiagnosed patients will become diagnosed just by looking back at their information. So we've had success with this approach on a number of patients. Every patient who has their genome sequenced here at Stanford through our clinical genetics service, we give the option to have their data periodically reanalyzed, both through a clinical lab that did the testing initially and also on a research basis to give us the best chance of, as close to that moment as possible when the information either about them or about their genome, what we know about it changes, that we can see that there's been an important change, and we'll find out and let them know that there's been a diagnosis. So it's a little bit of an unusual experience as a patient, and that usually we expect we'll get information from our doctor when we go to see them. And this is sort of something that's just in the background. So to me, I was driving home one day and it occurred to me this is a little bit like the warning lights that go off in your car, and that you can be driving along just on your regular commute. I have patients I haven't seen in 5 or 6 years, and something will turn up in one of our systems or at a lab where they were tested, and suddenly what didn't make any sense will be a diagnosis for them. So it's really wonderful that this can carry forward.
But I decided to try this with ChatGPT and see what happens, and I pray that they continue to allow this to work, that they don't censor medical on this, because it's very useful for medical research already. It's incredible. Even when it doesn't have access to the internet, and I can't wait for it to have access. It's going to change diagnosis so quickly. And here's what I did. I have a condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I typed in the symptoms of the condition. I never told AI what the condition is. In a matter of seconds, just like that, as fast as ChatGPT servers can tolerate, it wrote down an entire description of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome in a matter of seconds. That is what the technology should be used for, not this shared fantasy, sinful desire stuff. A false stimulation of our natural desires that were put into us. It's like pornography. It's not real. It's not an actual stimulus. It's a super normal stimulus. It does not satisfy us the way God created us. So I can't wait to see what this technology can do from a good standpoint, but I'm also terrified of what it's going to do, because we are already warned what the end times are going to do. So unfortunately, in the long run, this technology is going to fail us. But in between, for now, this technology might be able to help people get diagnosed of rare conditions and other issues and just solve problems that could, it's cool what it could have been and what it will be for a little while. So utilize that while it's available until it's time to go home. Anyway, I hope that makes sense to some of you that are unbelievers, and if you watch this all the way through, that is awesome. And if you're a believer, I hope this gives you some insight of the pros and cons. I'll talk about it later if I contemplate more on it, but I pretty much mentioned a lot of it. But knowing me, I'm going to keep thinking about this stuff more, because I really like technology, but I also love nature and creation in general. And so I'm just trying to find this balance, because if we don't learn how to adapt to the technology, it's going to outrun us very quickly. And so we need to understand it and stay informed. We are not to be ignorant of Satan's schemes. This technology is going to be used by Satan, but it's also going to be used by the Holy Spirit. Remember that. There is some good that can come out of this, and we need to make sure that we are utilizing it to the best of our ability. Anyway, that's it for this video. Be sure to tap the like button on this video to get this video out to other people that may be unaware of AI as of right now, to prepare them for what is going to come soon. We are not to be ignorant of the devil's schemes. We should also be aware of the benefits of this technology if utilized properly, but we need to be very, very careful. It is so easy to fall with this technology. And I may get into that later, but as of right now, this is good. So tap like on this video and subscribe if you're new. And if you're an unbeliever and you watch this all the way through, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to hearing what you have to say in the comments below. And everybody else as well, let me know in the comments below what you think too, so we can discuss this further. And obviously, please keep the conversations as respectful as possible. We are to love one another, and let's continue to do that. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.